Superb. So as I've said, we will start with a couple of poll questions to get the conversation started. Uh, we already have about 56 odd people who've joined the conversation. Would really appreciate if all of us can participate in the poll. It is only going to help us all understand where we are coming from in terms of engaging volunteers for fundraising and how this session is going to be useful. It will also help the speakers understand where each of you and your organization stand with regards to engaging volunteers for fundraising, and also tweak or maybe add a few more things to their sessions or presentations when they speak to you. I hope everyone's able to see the polls. We already have almost 27, 28 people and counting who've responded. There is a disclaimer though, if you're using an old version of the Zoom app on your phone or your desktop, you might not be able to participate. In case you're wondering, then it could be because of that. Superb. I think more than 70% of the people have responded. We'll wait for another 30 seconds to reach the golden number of 50, if possible. We are at 47. People who just joined, we are running this poll to help us understand where you are with your volunteering efforts towards fundraising. People who've kept the call on mute and are multitasking, I would still request you to participate in the poll and help us get this moving. 49. Superb. Thank you so much, Mannath. All right. I think we have the responses coming in. I am going to be sharing the results on the screen again for about 10 odd seconds for everybody to see where are each one of us with. Right. Seems like a lot of people haven't been engaging volunteers for fundraising. I'm sure you'll find the session quite useful. Majority of you have said that your major challenge is getting buy-in from the volunteers to do fundraising, followed by lack of a structured strategy to engage volunteers for fundraising. And then followed by sustaining volunteer engagement. So I think this is very, very helpful to get us started with the session today. I hope the speakers have also made a note of the responses or the overall sort of insights. So first up, we have Monica from Smile Foundation. I know there's a lot that you can read up on her or about Smile Foundation on their website, the LinkedIn. But I thought to introduce all our speakers, I'll share a little bit something that I discovered about them and the kind of work that they do during the course of planning and then putting up this session. So when I was talking to Monica, apart from her having a great collection of paintings, although the ones that you see today in her background is not the one that I'd seen the first time, but she seems to have a fantastic collection of paintings. But apart from that, I think what I really like about her and the team at Smile Foundation and what they're doing around fundraising is the way how they look at every child as a potential fundraiser, no matter what sort of background, what kind of schools they come from, but really giving every child an opportunity to be able to do fundraising. No limits whatsoever. And they've also been very, very creative in the kind of mediums and channels that they use and the kind of incentives that they also have for their volunteers as well as other stakeholders. So yeah, we'll have Monica from Smile Foundation share for the next 20 minutes. And then we'll go to the next one. Over to you, Monica.
Hi, Dharraj. Thank you so much. And good afternoon, good evening to everyone here. It's an absolute honor to be present amongst you. So without taking much time in terms of introductions, I had a lovely interaction with Dharraj about what exactly is going to be the crux of today's conversation or interaction with all the participants in the session. So a big point was about engaging volunteers. Everybody is from the social service sector. And we know that as the generation is changing, we see a kind of a cultural change amongst the people in India, where they're now keen to volunteer. Earlier, volunteering was not something that, our generation or our parents were very keen to do it. But now the 20 somethings and even the younger ones, the so-called Gen Z and the millennials, are keen volunteers. When I say keen volunteers, it means that most of them are interested in engaging with the beneficiary community. They don't really understand what are the different aspects where their skills and their talents could be utilized. So first of all, as an organization, we need to understand where we can fit in what set of volunteers. So keeping that in perspective, what Smile Foundation actually did was they tried to bifurcate the way the volunteers could be engaged in the different programs. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about the different programs that we have. And then specifically one program where we have very successfully engaged the student volunteers, so to say. So just allow me a few seconds where I start sharing my screen. Okay. All right. Of course, Smile Foundation is about spreading smiles across India. Who we are an Indian development organization working for the welfare of children and their families in the field of education, health, livelihood, women empowerment, disaster response. Now, the idea of Smile Foundation, the vision, so to say, was providing education to the less privileged children and to bring about something called a civic-driven change. Now, when I say that it is civic-driven change, it means that the society per se, the civil society per se, takes responsibility of the less privileged community. So which means that if everybody from the privileged community is working and is empathetic enough, then we will automatically see a spurt in volunteers. And they are now taking responsibility of the upliftment of the less privileged community. So keeping that in mind with the theme of civic-driven change, in 2002, we started with a program called Mission Education, which was about, of course, the education of the less privileged children. But having realized that education cannot be forced onto children in silo, we had to follow more of a life cycle approach. So we started looking into their nutrition, into their health, into the health of the mothers. We started focusing on the livelihood and the employability skills of the eldest siblings, where the women and the sisters in the household would also be empowered enough to get trained, to become self-employable. And as such, we would see an improve in the standard and the quality of living of the child, so to say. And that's when the child would be empowered enough and interested and motivated enough to be educated. So we started with the concept of education. We are now working in a life cycle model. And of course, with the different kinds of calamities that keep on hitting the different states in our country, as well as the ongoing pandemic, we do have a disaster response team where, in fact, in this disaster response, it is the NGOs actually who end up becoming the first responders. Here also, we have a lot of volunteers, so to say, who work with us. Now, when I'm talking about the volunteers as such, they kind of choose which is the different program that they want to get associated with, whether they also want to be associated with, say, our digital marketing team, whether they also want to be associated with, say, a team that is looking for someone who can work in database management, or someone who is trained in, let's say, data analytics and can, say, spend about a month with us and help us do some backend analytics to understand that the donors, the collections, the volunteering, what is the kind of correlation between all these different sets of data points, so to say, for a civil society organization. So there are various areas where the volunteers can be engaged, but very quickly jumping into the specific topic that was given to me, where we are going to talk about engaging student volunteers. So if you see the images, you can see that these are children from schools, which we could say as the good schools, who have volunteered to interact with the children who are a part of our beneficiary community in the mission education program. Not only do they physically interact with them, they also do fundraising. So, which is where our program, which is called the Child for Child program, technically has stepped up in terms of fundraising for the organization. Now, we understand that COVID has been a kind of a setback to the entire NGO sector in terms of volunteer fundraising. But we have a lot of lessons that we have derived from the past, and we hope to continue to, capitalize on the lessons that we have learned, capitalize on the relationships that we have built, and the strong volunteer community that we are also engaged with. So just I've taken the example of 2017, which is like 2 years before, or rather 2.5 years before the pandemic actually kind of put a stopgap to the excitement in the volunteer community. So just telling the story of a pre-COVID time, the Child for Child program is actually a program where the children from the privileged community have taken responsibility for the upliftment of children from the less privileged community. So which means that a student in a school is trying his or her best to support a less privileged counterpart, so to say. So what we did was we realized that there are over millions of schools in our country which can be reached out, which could be our so-called target set. And because it's a nation with a huge geographical diaspora, we decided to split it into 8 regions, where you have the north being split into 2, then you have the east, then you have the west, then you have the central, you have the south being split into 2 because there were multiple states that could be put under different regional heads and regional directors. So what we typically were operating was we had 8 regions, and each team was given a certain number of states. And then within the states, they would be picking up the cities where they had an easy inroad into, and therefore reaching out to the schools, like speaking to the school management, speaking to the principals, and therefore connecting with that many schools in a very successful and a progressive way. So it was a year when we reached out to about 4,500 schools, which can be increased. The bigger team that you have, the more the number of schools that you can reach out to. But having said that, we also have a budget constraint because there is just so much of cost that we can bear. There is a significant chunk of the revenues that we raise that has to go towards the beneficiary community. So the cost, which again, I'm going to talk about in a separate slide, what are the different aspects of the cost, etc. So keeping all of that in mind, there were about 4,500 schools that we tapped, and about 2,500, which means about 55% schools successfully connected with the Child for Child team, which means that we had people who were walking into these schools, engaging with the principals, with the coordinators, addressing the students, engaging them in different kinds of activities, and therefore motivating them to do fundraising for the mission education program. Now, it was the time when schools and the students would connect better with education of the less privileged child. But now during COVID, we have seen that there is a slight shift because the children now have more time to research. The children have seen the adverse effects of COVID, especially the first and the second wave, especially the Delta impact. So now we see that there is a kind of a shift, a gradual shift from not just supporting education, but also supporting the environment. Climate change is a big thing around the student community these days. Then the second thing that they're also very keen about is the nutrition. So any person who is, immunity is compromised, was becoming a victim of the COVID-19 pandemic. So that kind of set them thinking that there is a certain chunk of people who are still not COVID affected, and that means that they are healthier, relatively healthier. So nutrition, health, and environment are the new kinds of conversations that volunteers are interested in and would like to participate in. So, however, coming back to 2017, when education was still the big thing, we engaged with about, say, 12 lakh was the number of student volunteers. So it's like an average, you take, say, X number of children in every school. So the total number of volunteers that we had engaged with, all the way from 2015 to 2018 was roughly around 12 lakh children. And that's pan India. So the kind of funds that was generated was in the year 2017 was about 6 CR. And if we just bring it down, just calculate with the number of student volunteers, average student volunteer was raising funds, which was say 50 rupees. And when we further deep dive into the analytics and the data that we collected, we realized that every volunteer was reaching out to an average two persons, which means that one could be a parent and one could be a cousin or a next door neighbor. Now, there was a mandate from our side that these children should not be exposed to the strangers and walking around, like we didn't want them to do stuff like selling raffle tickets kind of thing. So every child would have access to say 2 people and getting an average donation of 25 rupees per head. The child would bring say 50 rupees next day or in 3 days time to the school. So we gave every school a maximum of say about a week. We kept it tight because if you give them more than a week, which means that a Saturday, Sunday comes into the picture, that's about it. Any other, so it's best to actually approach for physical fundraising on a Thursday, motivate them on a Thursday, ensure that they have all the documents with them by the time it is Friday, so that the kids have a Saturday and a Sunday to approach whoever they were approaching. And Monday and Tuesday is when they could come back and submit their donations to the teacher, who would then give it to the coordinator, who would then give it to Smile Foundation. So we kept it very tight, and which meant that our people who were on field really had a lot of work to do. So not only were they acquiring schools, they were also managing schools. So they were like people in the front line as well as people at the back end who were account managers, so to say. So now when it comes to the story about the kind of schools that we reach out to, we realized that 80% of the funds were being raised from B category schools, which are located in smaller cities and not so much in the metropolitan cities. The reason being that the people there we found to be more empathetic in their outlook, and B, it was much easier to approach those schools. They didn't have the multiple, firewalls, so to say, to enter the school and speak to the principal. It's much easier to walk into, or was much easier to walk into those schools. Of course, the scenario will change once the schools reopen during COVID or post-COVID, whatever be the situation. However, 20% of our funds were raised from A category schools. So we did have a certain percentage of the schools who were very successfully engaged with us in the top 8 metropolitan cities. And how would we classify the schools? It was basically on the basis of the fee structure that we had. But interestingly, the children who were paying lesser fees were also willing to do a bigger collection. That's the irony of the entire volunteering study that we did. As far as retention of the volunteers is concerned, we were able to retain about 60% of the students. So we never approached a school more than once in a year. We didn't want to be the fundraiser or the collection agency for a school. It was always for a cause. And we did not want to disturb a school more than one time. So when we went back the next year, we found that 60% of the students would continue to be engaged with us, but the remaining 40% who were probably in the 8th standard and therefore had moved on to the 9th standard, they tend to disengage. And a very interesting analysis for us was as the system became more formalized for the preschool and the the nursery and the KG. And as we started getting permission to interact with those children, we realized that the younger ones were also as excited a volunteer as the child who was, say, in the 6th grade or the 5th grade. So a child all the way up to the 7th and the 8th grade, we found them to be beautiful volunteers. You know, they would listen, they would follow the rules, they would actually go back home, do the fundraising and come back to us, and would also be excited to be continuously engaged with us. So the 18 to 14 years were ideal that we found in the age group for engaging as student volunteers. The 16 and 18 years, especially in the metropolitan cities and the IB curriculum schools, we found were more keen to be engaged as volunteers for the academic credits. Especially, you will notice that in the IB curriculum, you will have something called a CAS, which is the regarding the community assessment and the services that they do. So for them, it's a mandate. So there would be just a certain percentage of children who would come for us for the academic credits. But at that time, majorly, they would be very happy to participate in the program. Now, when we look at the accumulation of the funds, the kind of data that we could put forth to the children and the schools was that the 6 crores that was generated would actually support the education of 10,000 children, which is a huge number. When you educate 10,000 children, it means that an entire community is getting positively impacted by our other projects, whether it was livelihood training sessions for the elder siblings, whether it was a women empowerment program for the mother. So 10,000, so the children started to understand that if their money was impacting 10,000 children and a multiplier effect on the community, they would engage with us more effectively and more excitedly also. So then we realized that let's not just keep them busy with fundraising. We also did multiple activities with them. And I'm sharing a list of, you know, it's not an exhaustive list. We organized competitions, we organized anti-child labor day commemorations, which meant that the children would actually step out and interact with a child from the less privileged community and, you know, even give small badges to them. So the cute part was that they got a chance to meet a child from a less privileged community and actually give badges to them. So there was no cash reward here. It was just something which was non-monetary. We made them participate in school events that we would organize for the Mission Education Program children. We made them buddy mentors. In fact, this Saturday, a lot of my students are doing online mentoring for children in the project for math and coding and so on and so forth. So the programs that they're associated with continues online during the pandemic. Now, we also make these children participate in something called a Smile Film Festival. Now, the SIFC is a beautiful way to engage the volunteers. They would actually spread the word. So it was not just about keeping them engaged for fundraising, it was also making them our brand ambassadors and what we call the Smile Champions. So they would go out and they would talk about a film festival, which was especially for the children and youth. And in Delhi, we would do it physically. So they would come in droves and participate in the Shri Fort Auditorium. We also did mini SIFCs in different parts of the country. We put together some schools, book an auditorium, and we would do the talk, but the conversations would continue. Whatever the event, the conversation that when you step out and you do fundraising for us, it's going to benefit 10,000 children. That conversation continued. So we kind of reinforced the positive message and the message of being empathetic. So just looking at the kind of costing that we have for the Child for Child program. Now, if we have a revenue of say about 6 crores, first let's do a backward cost calculation. Now, about 30% of the revenue we kind of allocated towards the salaries and the commission. So there would be some salaried employees and there would be some consultants who would be on a commission. Then there would be about say 8%, which we would put aside for the conveyance and the travel, because our team would be traveling interstates and intercity as well. Then prize distribution, which meant that we would give our volunteers non-monetary incentives, whether it was smile badges, whether it was bookmarks, whether it was even, something like a pouch, a pencil pouch. So we had an inventory of the prizes that we would distribute. We would definitely give some gifts to the coordinator teacher, and schools would also be receiving, say, a certificate of appreciation as well as a small trophy. So it was like a competition amongst the schools also. And we knew that the schools were also connected to each other. So the different DPSs would talk to each other, and they also kind of, did a comparison that how much did you raise this year and how much did we raise this year. So it kind of became like a very healthy competition amongst the schools, amongst our regional teams. So we did have to keep a certain amount for the prizes, which was about 2% of the revenue. Marketing collaterals meant that in those days, we needed brochures for SMILE, for the Child for Child program. We needed those appeal forms. So there would be a certain amount of, there would be those envelopes that we had to leave with the teachers. There would be a data sheet where they would enter the names of the students because we had to give them certificates. So marketing collaterals is also an expense that we had to put aside, say about 2%. And then the couriers, because sometimes the regional office did not have the inventory, and from the head office, we had to send the entire boxes of prizes. So all of these would be, say, approximately 48% of the cost. So we kept a margin of about 50%. Anything lesser would be fabulous. So that's the kind of costing that we had. I've talked about the tokens of appreciation that we have given to the volunteers. The university students prefer internship certificates and letters of recommendations. The little ones are happy with just certificates, with badges, with bookmarks, whatever you give them. That's the beauty of working with students. The story, of course, has changed during the pandemic. We now have volunteers who are still connected with us online, but schools also now want to keep a certain percentage of the funds raised because they have a lot of their own children who have suffered due to the pandemic. So our journey where we had workshops offline has shifted to an online mode, so Zoom and MS Teams, where we had these actual film festivals in huge auditoriums. Now they are watching these film festivals on their little gadgets, where the children would actually visit our project centers and engage physically. Now we connect these online breakout rooms so that they can also be associated. So the competitions also have gone online. The fundraisers have all gone online, but the journey continues. Thank you so much. And it was a pleasure making this presentation amongst all of you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Monica.
Did I overshoot my time period?
I don't know.
Sorry.
Mega was keeping time. She's the bad cop. But
I
so
don't know,
much.
but I'm
very, very, very
but,
well detailed. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Superb. Next, we have Karthee from Team Everest. A lot of comments pouring in, Monica, for you in the group chat section. But over to the next speaker, we have Karthee Vidya from Team Everest. Again, the unique thing about his fundraising engagement is when the first time I spoke to Karthee about his fundraising strategy, he said that the only qualification he has to be a speaker is that he's been a student of fundraising for the past 10 years. So he started studying fundraising in the late 2000s and has been studying and experimenting and doing a lot of stuff ever since then. And you'll see a lot of glimpses of that in his presentation. Over to you, Karthee.
Hi all. First of all, big thanks for IWT team for giving this opportunity. Pleasure connecting with all of you guys. So let me share my screen. Yes, I hope it's visible. Okay, so a very quick intro into who I am and what our organization does. So I'm Karthee Vidya. I'm the founder and CEO of Team Everest. So basically, we're a 15-year-old organization started in 2006. And my background is that I'm a 2006 passed out engineer, joined IT, worked in an IT company for almost 8 years and moved from IT to nonprofit in 2015 full time. So having said that, our vision is basically to inspire everyone to volunteer and make volunteering as a habit. So that's what makes me excited every day when I wake up. How do you make a country of 1 billion people to volunteer? So that's the goal. And how do you make volunteering as a very casual habit, just like how we go and have a coffee or we go for shoppings like that? How can we make it as volunteering as a lifestyle habit? That's what our organization works on. So if you look at it, we have around 25,000 volunteers, majority of them from corporate backgrounds, and we work with some 40,000 children, school children and college students. So that's a very small nutshell of who we are, what we do. And so let me get into our fundraising experience right now. So if you look at it, we do one program called, initiative called as I Am the Change Scholarship Program, where we identify parentless, single parented students and we sponsor them for their UG degree actually. So all our fundraising is mostly towards that particular initiative. So if you look at it, we were doing crowdfunding for the past 15 years. In fact, this is something that comes naturally to me. I don't know why, but this is where our expertise lies in. So for the past 15 years, we were doing crowdfunding, basically raising funds from individuals. And if you look at it, for our fundraising from volunteers, peer-to-peer fundraising, we use GiveIndia platform actually, and we have raised around 15 crores from more than 33,000 people in the past 4 years using GiveIndia. And last year, if you actually look at it, they run a GiveIndia fundraising challenge year on year, and we raised around 3.3 crores from in 2 months, Feb and March 2021, from some 8,000 plus people. So here are some key numbers before I go ahead and explain about the strategy that how we are able to raise these funds. So, so these are two things again. So pre-pandemic and during the pandemic. So if you look at 2019, 2020, so we were raising around 2.2 crores. And last year we raised around 3.3 crores. And volunteers, number of volunteers who are rising is almost equal 696 here, 660. And donors is again 7,500 people here, around 8,800. And the value that each volunteer raises around 31,000 rupees. And here, if you look at it, last year they were rising on an average of 54,000 rupees. And number of donors each volunteer on an average they bring us 11 and 13. And average donation sizes last year they were rising around 4,000 rupees per fundraiser actually. So this is just to give you an idea of the model that we work with compared to, I think you were listening to the Smile Foundation presentation where it's totally a different strategy that that they were working on. So these are basically most of the fundraisers were corporate volunteers, or few of them would be homemakers. So they reach out to their friends and family and they are raising funds. And so these are some key numbers that you could look into. 80% of our funds actually comes from 33% of your volunteers. So that key 33% brings a chunk of the money. And in terms of the number of donors, almost half the people, 46% of your volunteers brings in 80% of your donors. And in terms of donor retention, if you look at it, some 35% of these donors get retained through volunteers actually, because they bring in new donors and you retain them by engaging them in other activity, or they go ahead, make a donation next year kind of. Okay, so those are some very key numbers. So how can now you guys do this actually? So I'm just basically going to explain you exactly the way we actually do this. So let me first of all start with your story, because like when I was speaking with Dharam, I told them we want to run some polls to get some data, because fundraising is little tricky here. Every nonprofit, multiple nonprofit year actually sits at different stages. So some would be an expert in fundraising, some would be just starting, and everyone's strengths and weaknesses would be totally different, right? So that's a lesson that I learned much earlier. So let me tell this story. So I had a friend, who actually used to run a music show. He runs a nonprofit and he runs a music show and he raises funds via that music show. So basically he gets some sponsors to do the music show. He sells tickets, he gets the money, and whatever money that they raise from that single music show, they actually use it to, use that as the fund for the rest of the year. And like that was pretty good. I mean, they were a very small non-profit, so they were raising around anywhere between 5 lakhs, 8 lakhs, or 10 lakhs. So 10 lakhs, they take that money, they're happy with that money, and they were actually doing a lot of good work using that fund. I got inspired looking at this, and I thought, okay, why don't we go and replicate it? And we have never done event fundraising at all. And when we tried replicating it, we found out how tough it is, and it doesn't come very naturally to us. I figured it out, it's not our cup of tea. So anything that you try to do differently, try it for the first time, like only when we go and do it, you will start understanding the challenges and you will try to fix it. So I thought, okay, no, this is not our cup of tea. The reason being, I was also asking this question, why that guy is able to do and why I'm not able to do it. And then I figured it out. So when he used to work in corporates, he's been part of this kind of art clubs where he meet a lot of musicians, singers, comedians, kind of. So that's his core strength. So basically he used that strength to raise funds for his nonprofit. So my biggest lesson being, what works for others may not work for you as well, right? So because every organization's strength and weakness is totally different. So say what worked for Smile or for Team Everest might not work for you. Some other strategy might completely work for you. So to start with, you never forget this thing. If you need to raise funds from volunteers, first of all, you need volunteers. That's the core thing. Because like if you come and look this kind of a concept where we are making volunteers to raise funds, first of all, you need volunteers, right? It's like you want to make a coconut chutney, you need coconut to make that. It's a very, very similar concept. You need, first of all, make your volunteers to raise funds. First, see whether you have enough number of volunteers. At least you have 50 people, 100 people, 200 people. That's a very good number to start with, actually. Because many nonprofit, whenever I used to make this presentation, I mean, the stories are great, but unfortunately, they don't have a pool of volunteers whom they can go and ask to be a fundraiser. So this kind of a model require some committed volunteers from your side who understand your nonprofit, who understand your cause, so that they can go and fundraise on your behalf. So the model that I'm going to present right now is the model that we follow at Team Everest. So you guys could tweak or come out with your own model of fundraising. But this is how we actually get this thing done. So I would say, if you are a nonprofit where you have volunteers, huge pool of volunteers, like when I say huge, at least 50 people, I would say individual fundraising is definitely a great option, because these people, knowing your nonprofit personally, knowing your cause, they might come forward to sign up as a fundraiser. Okay, so let me talk about the recipe of fundraising success. If you want to raise a good amount of decent amount of money, these are some things I strongly believe you need to kickstart your fundraising. To start with, trust is the foundation. That is something I understood. So I like one of my personal thing that I want to tell you was, I got to know about peer-to-peer fundraising, that is making a volunteer to fundraise on your behalf, probably in 2008. But until say 2018, I didn't implement that concept at all. Why? Because I didn't, first of all, believe that this concept would work actually. So I was reading it on internet. All the solutions you need is already on the internet, but we read it, but we don't believe that, right? So once I started believing, it started working in our favor. With respect to this pointer, see, if you are going to ask a stranger to contribute, to donate, what are the chances that that person is going to make a donation to your organization? You're just going and randomly asking a stranger. I don't know what is the number. Some are able to master that bit, but most of the cases it will be like 5% or 10% or 2% or 3%. I don't know. You ask 100 people, 3 people or 5 people might contribute, right? Now imagine donation itself is so tough. Then if you are asking a stranger to fundraise for you, it's going to be very, very difficult. So I always used to give this analogy. See, it is like you are meeting a girl for the first time and you're going and proposing her directly on the first day. What are the chances of that girl going to come and tell you yes to your proposal? It works the same way over here, right? What happens the moment you start building trust, the moment those individuals get to know that, yes, you are actually making a huge difference to the society, then these people start trusting you. Then they will open their pocket, they will start making a donation, they will start fundraising for you. So our model of fundraising is built on trust actually. So we always, like as a non-profit, we pick volunteers who know our organization, who know our causes very well. Because I strongly believe if I pick a person who don't know enough about us, but all I care is only about money. Now say, imagine that fundraiser, that volunteer goes and asks, say, bunch of, say, 10, 20 people, and those people are asking him some question with respect to our scholarship or with respect to our organization. And if that guy is not going to answer, now two things happens there. Number one, it creates a negative branding for your organization, number one. And number two, now people are going to more, like, not going to trust the non-profit sector as a whole. Already, like, there are some negative images for non-profit organization. Now someone is coming and asking money and they are asking a question, you're not replying, they'll think, yeah, what, all non-profits is like this, they are cheaters, kind of, those kinds of brands start building. So we want to be very, very cautious that whether we are creating a positive brand for your organization when you make someone to go and represent your organization, raise funds, number one. And as a whole, as a sector, are we creating a very positive experience for these donors, or are we creating a negative experience for the donors? So in Team Everest, what we do is we pick people who know about us, and it's always an opt-in model. We never force any person to fundraise. We only request them whether they can be a fundraiser. If they tell yes, we pick them. If they are hesitant, we don't ask them to fundraise, first of all. So trust is the foundation. So what are the rest of the recipes for your fundraising success? So first is trust. Second is efforts, because, like, if you are not putting enough input, you can't take an output there, right? You definitely need a dedicated team, because you want to guide your fundraisers, guide your volunteers to go and fundraise. So a lot of efforts is involved, number two. Number three, you need a right tool. In our case, we are using Vidya. So there are many other platforms which could enable this kind of peer-to-peer fundraising. So you need a right tool to do this. And the fourth thing is right communication message, because, like, it's like, how better I pitch this idea to the people, so that, like, they actually get convinced and they come and contribute to your message. So definitely I would strongly say copywriting and the way you pitch plays a very, very crucial role that increases your conversion rates as well. So you need a good communication message and a convincing cause as well. For example, few causes, we have done few experiments with respect to this, but some of these causes, we mostly do a lot of our initiative in education. So scholarship is something many people are already aware of. So it's not that I'm talking about a very rare disease trying to create an awareness and then raise funds. Here the cause is many people were able to understand this cause, connect with this cause. So you need to definitely pick a very, very convincing cause to fundraise. So my suggestion, if you're starting for the very first time, don't pick up 4 or 5 causes, because then you need to create 4 or 5 communication messages. You need to work deeply on it. Instead, take one cause and try to bring in huge pool of volunteers to fundraise for that particular cause. That's what we do at Team Everest right now. Once you have all these things, so this is a basic understanding of fundraising, right? There are 2 concepts. One is your crowdfunding, next is the peer-to-peer fundraising. So basically, crowdfunding is something where the organization directly asks your volunteers. Say, for example, in Team Everest, we have 25,000 people. I ask our 25,000 volunteers to donate. That is crowdfunding, basically. But if I ask these 25,000 people to fundraise on our behalf, then it is peer-to-peer fundraising. So what I'm talking about here is making your volunteers as a fundraiser, not as a donor, because what we have seen is if you make your donor or a volunteer to fundraise, their fundraising capacity is always 10 times more than their donation capacity, which means, say, the donor is able to donate, say, 10,000 per year, then their fundraising capacity would be 1 lakh per year. That's what we have seen. And like, in the poll, there was a question. Yes, many people, I would say, are very, very hesitant to fundraise because, I don't know, as a culture, we probably don't want to go and ask someone else for help. You are worried about what will they think about me. These are hesitations that you need to overcome through. But because as a children or these people are not used to fundraise for a cause, so they have a lot of hesitation about asking. So usually our conversion rate is 1 in 3 people. So you ask 3 people, 1 will agree to be a fundraiser actually. So so these are the basic difference between what is the crowdfunding model and what is the peer-to-peer fundraising model. And what happens here, for example, in crowdfunding, the strangers do not donate, right? Because my 25,000 people, they know who we are. So when I go and ask, there are more chances they will donate, but I go to the, say, the other person whom I don't even know. Say I know Dharam. Okay, I ask Dharam, there are chances Dharam might make a donation to me. But what about Dharam's friend who don't even know me? If I go and ask them, they will, the chance of them giving to Team Everest will be very, very less. But what if I ask Dharam to fundraise for Team Everest? When he goes and asks his friend, the chances of that person contributing is very, very high. So that's why in crowdfunding, asking donation from stranger, getting money from stranger is very hard. On the other hand, peer-to-peer, when you ask, their strangers become your donors because it's a trusted person who goes and asks them for donation. So this is the basic difference why it brings in 10x more money for you. So in crowdfunding, you ask volunteers to donate, and most of the cases, what I have seen is individual donations brings 80% of your funds, because many people think social media, let me go and put in there and people will see this, they will donate it. What we have seen after multiple surveys is that social media hardly brings in 10 to 20% of your funds. Maybe there will be odd non-profits who may be getting much better funds, but non-paid social media hardly brings in 10 to 20%, because there is an all social media algorithm that you need to break, and people mostly comes to social media for fun. So the chances of them clicking and making a contribution is very, very, it helps you create a lot of awareness. But in terms of bringing in funds, I would say individual, when you go and ask them individually, that gives you 80% of your funds. So mostly in this case, you need not even call and ask them, even WhatsApp individual messages work rather than a group message. And yes, don't skip multi-channel communication like mail, social media, and crowdfunding. But yeah, individually asking them brings in more funds. With respect to peer-to-peer fundraising, like I told you, ask your active volunteers to be a fundraiser, because if say they are in your mailing list but they have never participated in any of the activity, the chances of them telling a yes to a fundraiser is very, very less, because they have not started engaging with your organization. So, and even if they tell a yes, the chance of them bringing in huge funds is also less. So target the active volunteers. I would say, when say our active volunteer, it could be your monthly donor, it could be someone who donates every 2 months, 3 months, or who volunteered at least for 1 or 2 activities in a year. You can go and ask them whether they want to become a fundraiser. The chances, say that guy has volunteered for 5 times or 10 times in a year, there are more chances they will tell yes when you go and ask them to be a fundraiser. And basically, all they do is they reach out to their individual network, ask for funds, you train them basically, and you give them templates. They can go back and do that fundraising for you. So this is a summary of how we do this fundraising, the overall workflow. So you identify your potential leads. You set that number. Hey, it could be a guy who has donated more than 10,000 this year. So for me, the frequency is very important. They have donated 5 times this year, 500 rupees. That guy, the chance of that guy telling yes, I will be a fundraiser, is more than a guy, more chances than a person who have contributed one time 10,000 rupees. So identify your potential leads. You keep those numbers, and then ask them whether they want to be a fundraiser. Get their consent. Once they tell yes, you hire them, you onboard them to whatever model you do, and do an orientation to them, give them templates, make it as easy as possible for them to fundraise. And also share them a help desk contact number, so that anytime they get stuck, they can get back to you and get their queries clarified. Because fundraising is an art and science. These people are doing it for the first time. They may not be very good at marketing. They may not be very good storytellers. So there's a lot of anxiety around it. And anything that you do for the first time, you will always have anxiety. So make sure you have this help desk in place, so that they reach back to you and ask for questions. And once the training phase is over, the fundraiser reaches out to their friends and family. They start asking for funds. Meanwhile, they get any doubts, keep clarifying them, keep them motivated basically throughout that fundraising phase. Keep sending them frequent messages on WhatsApp or emails to them, and run some motivational webinars in between. Whoever wants, let them come in, so that they feel like, okay, it's not that these guys delegated me some task to do fundraising and we ran away. No, keep them motivated. So show them that you are always there to support. And finally, once the fundraising is over, you raise all the funds, go back and tell them how this funds makes a difference, because that's what motivates them to come back the very next year as well. And once they see, like, oh, these are not funds, these has the potential to change lives on the ground, I think that story is what make them feel happy, make them feel more human. And they I mean, they feel like, okay, I've done something useful to the society. I think that feeling is very important when we make volunteers as fundraisers. So I would say if you are someone who have never tried crowdfunding at all, please try crowdfunding first, because so that you will understand what are the difficulties in raising funds from individuals. And once you master that, then move on to peer-to-peer fundraising, because now when someone is struggling to raise funds, you know how those kinds of problem needs to be resolved. So my suggestion would be always try crowdfunding before trying to master peer-to-peer fundraising. And like I told you, fundraising is an art and skill. So do lot of experiments, keep learning, like we never stop learning. Actually, every year we are discovering new things. Keep experimenting throughout the year, run mini experiments. It's okay to fail actually, but keep experimenting. And remember, what works for others might not work for you. The exact strategy, whatever I told you, if you go and try, some nonprofit try, it might fail. So because like I told you, everyone's weakness and strengths is different, but these could act as an inspiration catalyst for you to go build your own model. So my suggestion would be, build your own style of fundraising which suits your style of leadership or your organization strengths. And all the very best, guys. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much, Karthee. I think very, very insightful, a lot of action-packed session. In fact, my favorite part though was the coconut chutney analogy, I think. And I think someone in the middle was also popping popcorns or something. I think they got hungry after your chutney analogy. But I think really, really insightful, especially the side in the end. I think the slide with the steps and all, I think it's a classic case study. I'm sure a lot of people have made notes and will be learning a lot from it, and people have also already started asking questions and sharing comments. Thank you so much, Karthee. Next, we have Jagdish from Habitat for Humanity, India. Jagdish, like Karthee, also believes fundraising to be science as well as an art. And he's in fact taken it to the next level, where he's gotten himself and his son to also be a part of this learning and this science and art, and have both of them have raised money for several causes using different platforms, including crowdfunding, doing it through events and stuff like that. So next up, Jagdish Peswani from Habitat for Humanity, India.
Dharmaraj, hi. Thank you so much. And before we start, very good evening to everyone. I seek the blessings of Bhagavan and my Guru, Puja Gurudev Swami Chinmayanda, to guide me in what I speak. Before we start, I would like everyone to open their cameras. We need to have some energy. We are in a Zoom session. This topic is very important for fundraising. There is energy when it goes around when the camera is on. So I would request everyone to have their cameras on, and for the next 20 minutes to have cameras on. And Dharmaraj can take a nice Zoom fee, as we call it. It's not fees. Zoom fee is like a selfie. So I think it's very, very important that everyone has their cameras on, because that drives energy. Because if we are really serious, and I'm sure all of you are attending this are serious about this. I still see one screen which is there with camera on. I'm sorry if I put anyone in any embarrassment. That was not the idea. But
a lot of people have it on, Jagdish. I think bunch of them. You may not be able to see it, but I think
I'm able to see it. I'm
okay.
seeing it. I'm going around. Don't worry. I'll take 1 minute extra, but this is really needed, because thanks Monica and Karthee. I think Karthee has covered quite a lot. We still have some few people who have not opened up. I don't want to take their names, but Ketki, Sanjana, Anisha, and others. please open your cameras, and everyone, because that's where the energy goes in. So that would be good. So Dharmaraj, if you can just share the presentation, which is there. So, when the research was done, and most of you haven't used volunteers over here, what I just want you to type, and this is going to be very interactive over here. And I'm requesting everyone to have their cameras on again, because I'll tell you what, if when you're going to do crowdfunding, and if your volunteers are not going to have your cameras on, boss, you're not going to raise any funds. So please keep your cameras on. Trust me on this. So coming back now, how many of you have raised the funds yourself, and what's the kind of funds you have raised? Since Karthee has already taken a lot about, peer-to-peer crowdfunding, which I'll take more. But if you can just type in your chat room, how many of you have done it yourself? That would be good. We'll keep about 30 seconds to 1 minute. Just type in the chat room, even if you've raised 1,000, 10,000, 20,000, whatever you have raised, that would be fine. Looks like not many have done, but that's fair enough. With grace of God, I have been able to raise personally 10 crores a year as a group. That's great. 2 lakhs, 1 crore, that's fine. So myself, Jagdish Peswani from Habitat for Humanity, we are a housing organization, and we raise funds for housing, school sanitation, and various other programs over here. One thing which you can do is to keep notes. Also, personally, myself, I have been part of crowdfunding myself, having raised in Mahindra Open Drive. I raised personally more than ₹500,000 rupees. Was one of the toppers over there. It was a drive to Goa. And also my son did for Chinna Mission. He raised more than 3 lakhs during COVID times from more than 200 volunteers. And whatever I'm sharing is something which has personally come to me. I've been now with Habitat for 8 years. And also, when we're talking about the figures, I think many of us have talked figures over here. I have also been, apart from being with Habitat for Humanity, I'm also been an active volunteer with a cultural organization, which you can hold your breath. 67 crores. 67 crores raised in 3 months, only through volunteers. Okay. So that's the kind of power of crowdfunding which is there. Globally, you'll be surprised that more than 30% of the funds are being raised through crowdfunding. So either you adopt crowdfunding or others will not work, like face-to-face in school, like Smile, at Habitat, we have also been doing schools, but because of schools being shut and everything, there used to be a challenge. Coming back to Habitat for Humanity, we have raised last year 15 crores. So when the pandemic happened and, we were all saying what will happen and, how do we raise the funds? That's the time we went in over there. We adopted this model. We connected with schools who were doing online, especially the IB schools. Our focus is on IB schools. More than 200 IB schools are there in India. As someone already said about CAS, which is Creativity, Action and Service. My child also goes to an IB school. So I am aware about, how to structure the entire thing around CAS. And we had 6,000 students who raised more than 15 crores in just 1 year. Value per volunteer was about 25,000. That matches with Karthee. So Karthee, me and you will definitely connect because I think, we have lots in common. And exactly the same percentage of donors being 10, average donation size being 2,500. So I don't want to spend more time over there on the statistics, which is there. However, the donor retention has been 60%. Personally, I can talk to you about that because there's an active donor management involved in this. Pre-COVID, we used to raise about 40 lakhs through crowdfunding, but right now we have raised 14 crores. And that's what Karthee also explained, the difference between crowdfunding and peer-to-peer crowdfunding over here. Like Karthee said, crowdfunding is a science and it is a science to be learned. Okay. And I don't mind, Venkat and everyone, I would love to coach people in this science, which is there. So the science is one, it's about storytelling, that what is the story you're going to tell them. Second is communication. And that's what is the most important. Communication, 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 and communication. What your volunteers are going to communicate. And third, understanding the consumer behavior, which means it's a donor behavior. Whoever are making notes, please underline it, double underline it if you want it, that how the donors respond. To give you one brief perspective, and this is too short a time to take a detailed training, but it takes average 8 contacts from a volunteer to a donor for a conversion. 8 contacts. So it's not, you give a template and you feel that one time he sent it out, it will happen. It does not happen. And technology is very important. Like Karthee said, they've used Give India, we have used QandA, we have used Fuel a Dream, which is there. So crowdfunding is important. What is crowdfunding? So simply put, and that's what I want all of you over here, and we'll have some nice pages in the end. I want all of you to start doing crowdfunding yourself for tomorrow. It's using nothing, but it's using the power of your mobile phone. If all of you have a mobile phone, just go through your mobile phone and see the number of contacts you have. Very, very, very simple definition of crowdfunding or peer-to-peer crowdfunding. Now, what you have, Karthee has already spoken about it, peer-to-peer crowdfunding, which is, your volunteers going to many people. What we have done is we have got something called a managed peer-to-peer crowdfunding. So during the Tata Mumbai Marathon, we had this peer-to-peer crowdfunding where our students will go, we will give them a template and they'll do it. But what we have done is that there is a proper 30-day program. Yes, it's a 30-day daily program. Daily, there is a communication from the organization to the volunteer, what he's supposed to do. So what happens in peer-to-peer crowdfunding is you give the ingredients and you ask them to cook, right? If he's a good cook, he will cook good food. But if he's not, we don't know. So therefore, what we do is we give him cooked food and he just has to eat. And that's what managed peer-to-peer crowdfunding is there. How do we do it? Through a dedicated team, support to volunteers, and getting the right technology which is there. The cost involved is platform fees and bank charges, which is approximately 10%, along with staff cost and cost of raising funds is 15 to 18%. But the critical thing over here is manage crowdfunding. Over here, about our volunteers, most of them have been from the IB schools, which I've already talked about. We also engage young professionals who are in the age bracket of 35 years plus. And 90% of the funds raised by volunteers is for unrestricted funding, which is there. There's no any incentive or anything which is there. But I believe honestly that everyone is a fundraiser, and you really need the right kind of tool to raise funds. So that's what the critical is there over here right now. The next slide, please. Yeah. Key learnings, as I've already talked about before, active volunteering and campaign management is the most important factor. Donor management is very important, because what happens is many a times, we think that yes, the volunteer will do the donor management. So I'm not going to. So the key thing, if you're writing it again, underline it, double underline it, that you should not connect with the donors directly. Other than sending them the donor updates and reports, you connect them through your volunteers. But the fact is that you need to update your donors from time to time that what you are doing, because you need the donors to come back again, the volunteers also to come back again. Now, one simple thing, getting the volunteers to start, okay, and to overcome their fear is the most critical part of the entire thing. Okay, so if you register 100 people, not everyone is going to start. And I think I do have time, courtesy Karthee's beautiful training. I'll show a small video also, which is over here, that why people don't start. Okay, but we have been able to have 70%. Choosing the right platform, that's again, underline it. It's very important, not only choosing the right platform, but having the platform to give you support, which is important. And positioning of the projects, that is also important. Like we have the state school campaign or the COVID relief. So to give you an example, if I go to someone and ask that please support the house I'm making, that person will not support. But the moment I say I'm making a house for the armed forces, okay, the martyrs who have lost, and that's what Habitat for Humanity does, immediately there's an emotional connect with the armed forces. All right. So this has been the key learning over here. If you can just, Dharmaraj, allow me to share the screen. I would just like to take a minute off and show video over here. Let me just enable the sound. Yeah. So this is the voice from one of our volunteers.
Hello there. My name is Atya Bredu. I study in Aminora School in grade 10th. So, as we all are aware about the current situation where we need to stay at our homes and stay safe. Many people have lost their jobs during this pandemic and had to move back to their native places where they did not have any source of income. They could not even survive. This is where Habitat for Humanity comes in and encourages children like me to participate in fundraising. We raise funds and give it directly to the ones who are in need. When I got to know about this through my school, I immediately had to participate because I have always wanted to do social work. And first I was reluctant because I did not think I would be able to reach my goal, but within one day, my set goal that was 50,000 rupees, I was able to achieve it. And now I believe that nothing is impossible if you put a positive mind to it and able guidance. I hope you share this video to let more and more people know about the good job we are doing over here and help me raise more funds.
So if you see over here, what she said was that when I started off, I was never confident. And one day she raised 50,000 rupees. And how that is done? Let me show you again.
friends, and somebody says, yeah, we should go skydiving tomorrow. And you go, yeah, we'll go skydiving tomorrow. Yeah, yeah. And you go, yeah. And everybody goes, yeah. So then that night you're laying in your bed and you just keep, and you're terrified. You keep imagining over and over again jumping out of an airplane, and you can't figure out why you would do that. You wake up the next day and you go, down, and you say where you were going to meet, and everybody's there. So you get in the van and you're like, oh my God, oh my God. And your stomach is terrible. You
sorry,
can't eat.
I don't think we can see the video.
Who doesn't jump out?
Sorry?
We can't see the video. It's the same video frame. The audio is playing, but we can't see the video. You might need to change screens. You're on mute, Jagdish.
Sorry. So sorry. Let me do this again. 1 second. Can you see now? Can you see now?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
You take a drink with your friends and somebody says, yeah, we should go skydiving tomorrow. And you go, yeah, we'll go skydiving tomorrow. Yeah, yeah. And you go, yeah. And everybody goes, yeah. So then that night you're laying in your bed and you just keep, and you're terrified. You keep imagining over and over again jumping out of an airplane, and you can't figure out why you would do that. You wake up the next day and you go, down, and you say where you were going to meet, and everybody's there. So you get in the van and you're like, oh my God, oh my God. And your stomach is terrible. You can't eat and everything, but you don't want to be the only punk who doesn't jump out of this airplane. So you fly and you go up to 14,000 feet, and somebody opens the door, and in that moment you realize you've never been in a freaking airplane with the door open, and you're looking out down to death. And they say, on 3, and they say, 1, 2, and he pushes you on 2 because people grab on 3, and you go, and you fall out of the airplane, and in 1 second, you realize that it's the most blissful experience of your life. You're flying. There's zero fear. You realize that the point of maximum danger is the point of minimum fear. It's bliss. Why were you scared in your bed the night before? What do you need that fear for? Everything up to the stepping out, there's actually no reason to be scared. It only just ruins your day. The best things in life on the other side of terror, on the other side of your maximum fear, are all of the best things in life.
So how many of you are ready to jump and start fundraising from tomorrow? Please type in the chat. Yes. I want to see some energy buzzing around. Cameras again were off. Requesting everyone to put the videos on and say yes. Let's see some energy. Because if you show the energy, then your volunteers are going to show the energy. So let's have some people saying, yes, I will go out and raise funds tomorrow. Step on the other side of fear. Yes. We have so many 65 people. I can see only 20. And again, only some 25 screens on. Let's have more screens on. Yeah, Dharmaraj, if you can just put on back the presentation. Yeah. So, like Karthee said, first thing, what we do generally is when we start fundraising, we go out and put on the social media. No one does it. Okay, no one is going to fund your campaign on social media. So you need to reach out to your people, to reach out to your contacts, but do it today, go out tomorrow, find out a good crowdfunding platform. There are many. There is CrowdEra, there is Fuel a Dream, there is Give India, which provide this service, especially managed is important, and start raising. The second level of activity which is there, Dharmaraj, if you can just click the button, I think that's, yeah, it's cycling, cake bake sale, cooking, but not at the first level. These kind of activities, it's incidental, but the main thing is contacting all the people. And before I go to personal learnings, since I have the time also, and this thing, I just want to ask people some questions over here. Why do people, when in crowdfunding, they would click on the funders list? If you could just type in the chat, that why would people do that? So this is a science. People click on funders list because they would want to see how much you have donated yourself or how many other people are donating. Number one. Number two, people send out WhatsApp. No, don't send out WhatsApp. One call is more effective than the WhatsApp. Photos with campaigns, they get 2x more than the campaigns without. Now, if you're making a phone call, how much time do you think you should spend? You should not ask them about COVID. Many people will say that 10 minutes and 8 minutes, it should be 2 minutes. So crowdfunding is a very big science. Okay. And there are much more insights to be learned on each and every step. What is to be done on these 30 days. And personal learning is do your action, do the prescribed duties. This is something I've learned from the scriptures. Don't be attached to the fruit of action, whether it will be successful or not. Whether are you going to be successful? Do it. Don't consider yourself to be the cause of results. It's selfless activity meets success, and say no to inaction, which means get off your armchairs, which is Goya. Okay. And so does your volunteers. Funds will rain. That's all from my side. And before I conclude, I want all of you to take some pledge over here. So the number 1 pledge is you can type over there IVMRF. What I mean by IVMRF is I volunteer myself to raise funds. So I want all of you to actually type in the chat room IVMRF. MRF is the tire company, IVMRF, that I volunteer myself to raise funds. Let's have something buzzing around. If you don't raise the funds yourself, you will not be able to expect others to do it. So let it buzz around. Let's have videos on. There are 64 participants. Let's have more IVMRF. That's important. And the second pledge which we should do and have people buzzing around is, if IVMRF is done, that's good. IGVRF. I get volunteers to raise funds. Have positive affirmations. Don't think, never put will. I get. And that's what positive affirmations do it. That yes, you will be able to do it. That's all from my side. Thank you so much.
Superb. Thank you so much, Jagdish, for a very, very, again, action-packed in a very different way. I think a lot of people are smiling, a lot of energy in the room as well. Thank you so much. I think all the, not just the slides, but the activities, I think were also very, very helpful. Awesome. I think we're a little late overall, but I think that's okay. We've been able to cover all the ground and have the presentations too. We will be starting the Q&A in about a couple of minutes. We'll just do the final polls for now for literally a minute, and post that we will open the floor for Q&A. Meanwhile, you can start posting your questions in the chat section, and we'll have the speakers around to take them. I don't know if people are responding to the polls. I can only see 2 responses so far.
It's a long form, Dharmraj.
Sorry. Meanwhile, people who've already polled in, feel free to start adding questions to the chat for the speaker, so we can also start. Awesome. We have 50%, close to 50% responses. 30 seconds to go. Would really help if everybody can respond to the polls. Will also help us support with any follow-up activities from the session, and also plan future sessions better. Some of the feedback at least. Last 10 seconds, 50 people have responded. Last 10 seconds in case anybody hasn't or still filling the form. Okay. Thank you so much. We have the responses in. We'll open the floor for questions. I think some of them have already started coming in the chat. But in the meanwhile, okay. Karthee has shared his LinkedIn link, by the way, in case people want to connect. Vansh has a question for Monica.
Okay.
So I think once Monica has
Yeah.
already covered that in the session. The first one, each of these 12 lakh students roughly were raising about 50 rupees on average, between two people, 25 each. And there are 12 lakh students in the partner schools of the Smile Foundation. I didn't understand the question. Can you please elaborate once, either in chat or on by unmuting yourself?
Yeah, Dharmraj. So actually, I wanted to know that were these students actively raising each one of these, like all of these students were actively raising money, or was it like that the partner schools of Smile Foundation had 12 lakh students?
So it works in a way that the number of schools that we approach, they would have, let's say, an average 500 children. And if each of them starts participating, then you just multiply. Let's say if just a minimum is say 500, and if 500 is, we approach say about, let's say 3,000 schools, that means we have about 15 lakh children. And if each of them raises about 50 rupees, that gives you about 7 crore 50 lakhs. So that's how it works. So we work with the basic average of about each school having 500 students. But the moment you start hitting the bigger schools, there will be about, say, 1,000 children. And not all the children participate. So therefore, I'm saying that about 60% of the children would be actively participating, because the senior students are not really keen to do that kind of work voluntarily, unless they are, let's say, applying for an academic credit, or they are a part of the CAS program of IB. Most of the CBSE schools, they are not really, they are changing. The new education policy might incorporate it in the near future. But there would be, say, about 50 to 60% of the students would participate.
All right. That answers my question, Monica. Thank you.
I have a general question. Can I come in?
Sure.
Hello?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. It's a generic question to all the three panel members. All the schemes you have announced or you have shared are really unique and really commendable, I must say. Having said that, do you have a recommendation of an agency or someone who can actually run this program? Because most of the NGOs, I'm speaking on behalf of not only my NGO, but speaking on behalf of most of the NGOs here, even to put up that infrastructure of what Monica is doing, or what Jagdish is doing in Habitat, or what Team Everest is doing, is not an easy task. So do you have anybody to hold our hand and actually put this program on the ground rather than leave it theoretically?
Dharmaraj, can I respond?
Yeah, please.
Jagdish.
Sure.
Yeah, Dharmaraj, can I do? Yeah. So Mr. Ramesh and others, that's a very pertinent question. And I think this question will be there with all the charities' mind, and that was there with Habitat's mind also. So I would like to answer this question in two parts. One is a short-term part, another is the long-term part. In the short term, yes, there would be few agencies globally, not only in India, because I've been part of global campaigns, so I can say that with a lot of assurance. Very few agencies who can do your campaign end to end. Okay, and that comes at a cost, because when they have to manage it, they're deploying the people and everything. That is one. So short term, yes, to start off with, you can do that. But on longer term basis, it always pays to have your own crowdfunding site, invest that money on the crowdfunding, on their portal itself. And that's what I think someone from Akshay Patra said, that they have done their own portal. We at Habitat have done our own portal. So when you have your own portal and your own team members involved in the longer run, it does help in the entire thing. As far as training and other things is concerned, yes, it's a science. But if you have team members, then it does not take more than 3 to 4 hours of training to understand how the entire process works end to end. But yes, for a start, if someone wants, then yes, there are a couple of agencies globally who do this actively from end to end, which is managed peer-to-peer crowdfunding. If that answers the question.
Thank you.
So there is a very similar question I think someone has asked. It says Usha's iPhone. Do you also help schools develop a structured volunteering action plan? And no, I think this is a different one. So someone did ask about the kind of infrastructure for reaching out to as many schools and managing that number of volunteers. So every NGO starts small. So we started small, and we focused initially more on program implementation. Now, what happens with program implementation is that the funding is restricted, and 80% of the money, as per the latest norms now, have to go into the program. So whether it is for actually the beneficiary or the trainers or the infrastructure, whatever be the implementation activities that you have, 80% of the funds have to go there. The other 20% can be kept with the head office for their own internal. Maybe you're bearing the salary of the people who's actually the program head. Similarly, when it comes to the funding, let's say you get your FCRA certificates in place. Again, it's the same question that 80% of it has to be spent in implementation of a program activity. And there, similarly, if you're doing fundraising via Give India, again, that kinds of become restricted because a lot of these crowdfunding platforms, even if you have volunteers who are raising funds through them, a certain amount of that money has to go towards the program implementation because there is a UC as well as a report that has to be submitted. So there are certain platforms and agencies, even whether it is GoodAIRA also, which make your funds restricted to a certain percentage. It is through your individual fundraising and the volunteers who physically do it for you, or they're using their own platforms, or your organization has a platform, that you will get unrestricted funding that helps you to venture out into a lot of other activities and support the kind of people that you want and the good manpower that you want, because sometimes good manpower comes at a certain salary. So therefore you can start small by focusing on the program, and that's how you grow, and that's how we also grew, and every other NGO grows that way. But the unrestricted funding definitely will come from your volunteers. And to answer a question, and in the same breath where someone has asked that what is the kind of team that you had, yes, we had a pretty big team, but it was a mandate that everybody has to, it almost works like a corporate. Interestingly, it works like a corporate where we say we are an NGO, but if you are doing fundraising, then that fundraising has to be X times the salary that you're getting. So it is a very rigid structure where people have to operate in, and therefore it is always great if you have volunteers on board. So when the student volunteers do the job, it makes life much easier, because then you can have a relatively smaller team that reaches out to these schools, and you just have to ensure that the schools are continually engaged with you. And I'm just talking from the perspective of my Child for Child program. I'm not focusing at all on my IP team that works in a different structure altogether. So, and then in the same breath, I'll answer this next question, which is that, do you also help schools develop a structured volunteering action plan? And secondly, do these students engage with beneficiaries independently? No, we do not allow the students to engage with the beneficiaries independently. It is always because, number one, we are working with children. So there is the child protection policy that is in place. So the child cannot venture into our program center just like that. There has to be a structured way of the volunteers who step into the program center. A lot of documents need to be signed before you actually get to interact with our beneficiary children. A lot of our volunteer students want to click pics with them, but before that, they their guardians, their school need to sign certain documents where the privacy policies are put in place. So there is a lot of documentation that is put in place, and therefore a student volunteer cannot just step up and interact with a beneficiary child. So that we try to keep controlled.
Monica.
Yes.
Hi, Monica, in continuation to this question, which I had put up and you answered, I just want to know, is there any minimum volunteering hours that you expect the child to put up and then get into the fundraising, or the child can independently go and raise funds for you and that money is used to benefit the beneficiaries?
A very interesting question, because earlier, ma'am, there was no hours, that how many hours you volunteer with us, because there were two parts to our interaction with the children. Number one was where they would do fundraising. So like we kept a tight time period that during this time period, you can go and you can raise funds and come back to us. The other was when we physically let them interact with our beneficiary children. So then, yes, there would be a certain time period that they would be given, let's say 2 hours in a month, or 2 hours in, say, a quarter. So that was very structured. But now what has happened is, because a lot of these children are now connected with us online, the number of hours that they now spend interacting with our project children has really increased, because they've become like buddy mentors. There is more interaction digitally for us that is feasible. So especially what I have done is, other than my mission education, I've created a separate organic project with the Child for Child program, which helps me to connect my students from schools with them virtually. And so the number of hours has increased, and therefore they will now be keen to raise funds. So again, I'm hoping that it's going to be a snowballing effect. More students will join in, more participation, therefore more fundraising. I hope I've answered your query.
Yeah, thanks. That was really helpful. Thanks so much. And it's very interesting model. Kudos.
Thank you. Thank you.
There were two more questions, which if I can take. One was on the corporate volunteers. How do we engage the corporate volunteers? Yes, there is an attempt from Habitat to approach the corporates and get the volunteers. And that what also happens in the Tata Mumbai Marathon, that corporate volunteers raise funds. However, one thing we need to understand is that whatever 15 crores which Habitat raised was practically unrestricted funds. When you raise to the students, all you need to give them is a generic report saying this is what you're doing. But the moment you go to corporate volunteers, it gets into the restricted funding space, number one. Number two, how do you position them to the corporate volunteers? So there are two things which we pitch. We say that, as a HR person, do you want your company name to be published all around? Because your volunteers are going to reach to so many people without spending any money from your pocket, number one. And number two, many of your companies could have been stressed because of pay cuts and everything. So it's not your employees contributing. What he's doing is he's going out and raising funds through others. So there have been companies, who have asked their employees also to do it. But trust me, it's at a very nascent stage. Someone who's starting right now, I would not suggest that you go for corporate volunteers right now. Right now, go for in-house volunteers, which you have. That's number one. And maybe, to the schools, which is basically grade 9 to 12. So our model is quite different to that of others. We focus on grade 9 to 12, the senior students, the cash students from the IB schools, which is there. That is one. Second is, someone asked regarding the donor retention, which was there. So donor retention, as I mentioned also in my presentation, was that we send reports out to the donors. We don't solicit donations from them, because these donors have been gotten by the volunteers. We are more concerned with volunteer retention than the donor retention. So therefore, we send out messages to the volunteers saying this is what the updates is there. We do once in a year a donor event online where we invite all the donors saying, this is what you have contributed. We send them the reports, and through active engagement of volunteer, we ensure that they are there. It's not as easy as I'm saying. Again, this donor management through peer-to-peer crowdfunding is itself a 1 hour separate session, which I need to take. But this is in short, which is there.
Jagdish, just adding to this, how do you get the 6,000 volunteers? Because volunteers is the biggest challenge we are facing.
Correct. So for us, 6,000 volunteers, we have very close association with schools. with IB schools. There are 200 IB schools in India. They need creativity, action, service. Habitat for Humanity is a global brand name. So people who need certificates when they go abroad. So it's basically a pull. All the IB schools, most of the IB schools comes to Habitat for Humanity saying, hey, we want to work with you. And then we integrate this.
And you have a dedicated outreach team also for the same?
Yes, we have a dedicated outreach team.
Thanks.
There was also a question around what communication tools do you use to stay in touch with your volunteers? Karthee, would you like to speak about it? I know you've also been trying a lot of other stuff like WhatsApp for Business recently, but any thoughts on what communication tools are you using to keep in touch with the volunteers for fundraising?
Yeah, see, mostly throughout the year, the mass communication available is typically email and WhatsApp actually. So email, the open rate is pathetic actually. So on many younger generations moving from emails to WhatsApp and all. So ideally WhatsApp work, but so far we used individual WhatsApp only. So it's very little time consuming, but yes, with increasing scale, trying to operate virtually. Like if you look at our model, in our model, we don't meet our fundraisers at all. We sit in one place. See, hardly if you look at our model, there are 4 or 5 people in my team who actually raises these funds, works for 2 months and raise this funds. So our cost, if you look at to raise around 3.3 crores, it would be around what maximum would be 4 or 5 lakhs we would have spent, which is hardly 1.5% of the cost is what we have spent over there. So we typically, so to scale at 5,000, 10,000, it's going to be much harder. But the focus is to, when we are starting fresh, you start with a very small number with whatever resources you have and slowly scale it up. First year, if you look at it, we started with hardly 50 or 100 fundraisers. And been 3 years, 4 years we are doing now, we have scaled to some 600 fundraisers right now. So what we are now focusing on is instead of, because adding more fundraisers put more admin cost on you, and you are more focused on managing fundraisers rather than creating great experience for the fundraisers and donors. Our goal is to how do you per fundraiser you could increase the average donation that you could bring in. So most of the communication tool would be emails and WhatsApp in this case.
Karthee, the same question to you as well, that apart from what Jagdish mentioned, that they mentioned to the corporate that in all the messaging the corporate name would be there. Is there anything else you do to get this corporate fundraisers?
No, see, in this peer-to-peer fundraising, whatever we are talking about, we don't have any corporate donations happening. See, for us, right, basically, if there is an individual, he goes to his friends and family, he raises funds. We don't get any corporate, whatever money I'm talking about, none of this money come from corporates actually. So
sorry, I put my question maybe in the wrong way. My intention was not to ask for corporate donations, but what I understood was majority of your fund raising people are from corporates. They're not students. How do you get these people to do fundraising? How do you reach out?
So that is the point, right? See, as a nature of our organization is to promote volunteering in the country. So over the 15 years, we have built a community of 25,000 people who is part of our mailing list, who know what is Team Everest, who is Karthee kind of. So these are the people whom we are asking. Yeah, it's not, that's why, because if you remember my presentation, that's what I'm telling you. We don't have a model where I go and ask strangers, basically. We have a model where you build relationship over the time, so that then you try to convert them into a fundraiser. The chances of them telling a yes is very higher.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
And there's a very nice question by Anupama. Something which failed so that we reduce chances of repeating the same mistake. Of course, some of the best lessons we get from what we tried and we failed, and therefore we moved on from it. Maybe you should not, if you're working with young volunteers, do not engage with their parents. We tried to do that. The parents were not too keen. In fact, they pulled back their children from wasting their time working with an NGO. So for us, one of the biggest lessons was earlier we thought that we should reach out to parents, and it could be fantastic to have an entire family associated with us. However, the same parent may be engaged through the corporate that they're working in. But the moment their child is involved in volunteering, especially a younger one or someone who's in the 12th standard and therefore preparing for the boards, they feel a little, either unsafe or they feel that the time is being wasted. So do not be in a hurry to connect with the parents, because you feel that paisa to parents hi denge na, like buy the child. So don't take that additional step. Wait for it. The parents will approach you. So wait for that time. Yeah.
Monica, just I wanted to add, Rakesh from Akshay Patra. What I have seen, we are into the crowdfunding. We have our dedicated crowdfunding platform. What we have seen that we have engaged so many professionals and the students and the school students, IB students and all. Parents and their connection and their relative always contribute 40 to 50% of what they are supposed to raise fund, the targeted fund. So this is my finding, because I have somewhere 2,500 such the crowdfunding people where I have mapped all the donation. It is coming that 40 to 50% money comes from their parents and parents connection. Yes, rightly said, the class grade 10th and grade 12 we always avoid, because these two segment of students are probably busy for their board exams and all.
So what I was saying was, you rightly said that parents do donate, but I'm saying do not connect with them. Do not try to make calls to them. Do not try to actively. I did say that, their corporate would be involved.
Got it. Sorry. So I thought, So that campaign holder, basically they connect, they try to engage their parents. Sorry, I got the point. Yeah.
But I love the work that your NGO does. Akshay.
Thank you very much. All blessings. Thank you.
Great work, Rakesh. I think we both use the same agencies.
yes.
Both for in-house and external.
No, I was looking for your contact number, and I got your contact number. So I will be calling you for some more guidance regarding this. Sure. Fantastic presentation. All this stat was giving me lots of motivation. Yeah, thank you, Jagdish.
Also, I think there's one question from Mannat around what are the challenges or bottlenecks in volunteer engagement. So just building on that last question that Monica answered around things that have not worked or things that people should avoid based on your experiences or learnings. And if any of the speakers want to share challenges in engaging volunteers as well.
So from my side, as I said, the biggest challenge is that, the belief that this thing works. And that's why I showed the thing about fear. So physical challenge, if we talk about, it's all about getting the volunteers. But if you sow the thought in this universe saying, I can get volunteers, you will definitely get volunteers. It's not difficult to get volunteers. You need to build upon that. That is number one. But the biggest challenge after getting volunteers is to getting them to start. Even with all the organizations, not only at the national level, but at the international level, our struggle always has been motivating the people to start. I'll just use one anecdote. We got an 80-year-old person to do fundraising. Okay, 80-year-old person. He says, I don't know more than 10 people. Okay, and I cannot do, I have to do my contribution. Let me do my contribution. We said, no, sir, you can do that. So it needs multiple amount of pushes. Okay, so much so that after some time, he did 50,000 rupees in 3 days. And he told us that going beyond this is like milking a bull. If you know what milking a bull means, you cannot do it. We said it will happen. He did it. And you will not believe, he raised more than 150, from 150 volunteers, he raised more than 10 lakh rupees. An 80-year-old person. Okay. Because the science of crowdfunding, and that's for some other session, is just not about your volunteers reaching out to other people, their friends and family members, but also other people joining in. And there is also something called the science of sharing, which happens in crowdfunding. So if God wills and you have the right intention, there is nothing which can stop you. So, but as far as pitfalls is concerned, number one, you need to get your strategy right to onboard the volunteer, and you need to get your strategy right to get the volunteers to start. You get these two things correct, all done.
Great.
Karthee, maybe you would want to add?
Yeah, sure. So Manath, in terms of volunteer engagement, yes, I would definitely say MAD as a great volunteering engagement. You guys are actually working with them on a longer basis. Per volunteering hour per person is very high. Since wherever the engagement is high, I'm damn sure you can ask them whether they can become a fundraiser. So see, one basic thing that I would actually tell you here is, as a non-profit, you need funds. Okay, so that's from our shoes. But if you look at from an random guy perspective who's signing up as a fundraiser, something like that, or any guy who has not even committed to be a fundraiser, for him, it's not, he doesn't have any pressure to give you funds or raise you funds anywhere it is. Why are they first of all signing up? So mostly because, okay, can I contribute for a cause? One, and okay, it's for an experience basically. So if you look like a, say, a tea shop like that, you take a, for example, a coffee shop on a highway, like, so those kind of coffee shop will not get repeat visitors. Like, probably you'd have had one time, and probably rest of the time you might not even do that. But probably if you're a coffee lover, there's a coffee shop nearby your home, probably you might frequently visit over there. So you'll have some repeat people, you will have one-off people. And if you actually stand in their shoes and you think, why is this guys, okay, they have any other job in their life? Why are they first of all coming and raising funds for me? Are they crazy? You ask this way, you change the table. I will understand, actually go to the real motive of why these people wanted to come and fundraise first of all. So you will unearth the different motivations there. So and again, you will see sometimes the active volunteer will fundraise for you the first year, second year, third year they may not fundraise. Suddenly fourth year they might come up, or they will never come up also, right? When you go deeper, see, probably what would have happened is, say, the mother might have passed away. Now there is more pressure on that volunteer to take care of the child. So see, it's a journey, right? So for them, it's an experience. They're trying to create an identity of a volunteer or a fundraiser, that I am trying to make a difference to the community. So all we could do was give them enough opportunity and make people to opt in. You do all the things, motivate them, but we never force them. Instead, you create this opportunity and tell them, hey, you know what, if you are part of this, you will get an amazing opportunity to make a difference. Would you like to have this experience? It's like anyone, okay, why should I go to a marathon? For the experience. Why should you go to a stand-up comedy? It's for the experience, right? I would say a lot of people come here for the cause, for the experience, to feel myself. I mean, I would say the fundraisers takes more than they actually give, because they have the pleasure of satisfying themselves that I did something back to the society. So you could understand that emotion, why they come, right? Then actually you can put up strategies accordingly.
So, hi, this is Garima from Akshay Patra Foundation. Am I audible to you all?
Yes, Garima.
Yeah, so I just wanted to check with you, Karthee, one thing. Like, yes, we also tried one crowdfunding platform, and we could get a lot of volunteers. They were usually most of them were students only, college students who wanted some kind of a certificate or something just to volunteer against whatever hours or time what they were committing to us. And they did try it. I won't say that they didn't try raising the funds. They tried, but there were many of them who didn't have the circle, that kind of a circle who could contribute or give something. And by the end of the campaign, we felt that they were feeling a little frustrated that they couldn't contribute, or how to keep them, motivated, engaged, or even if they couldn't. I mean, this was one challenge I felt, and I still feel that how to keep bringing them again and again back to the campaign, or stay with us for longer period.
Got it. Garima, see, just to quote you the global average, your fundraising retention rate is 25% across the globe, actually. So which means only 1/4 of the person actually retain, and that's the same average with Team Everest also, number one. Number two, see, there's another statistics is, if some fundraisers continuously for 3-4 years, fourth year they raise 4x more money than the first year. Why? Because, like I told you, it's an arts and science. You are mastering the art and science of fundraising. You know the nuts and bolts now. This works, this doesn't work, this strategy sucks. So that's what you are figuring out. It's a learning experience, right? So what happens, right? So we had an experience of fundraising with college students, actually. So, like with IWT, Intennshala, we took 500, 600 people, fundraisers trying to fundraise. Like I will tell you, I was expecting we'll rise around 1 crore, 2 crore. Yeah, 1 crore, 2 crore. We ended up pricing 10 lakhs. I didn't even add in my dream that I would be ending up with such low funds actually. I mean, still it's a good amount, but still, you know, compared to my expectation, it's only 10% of what I actually raised. So because the motivation behind the crowd from Intentional is totally different. So, and another thing we did is also, right, we told them if you raise 1,000 rupees, I will give you a certificate, because we don't know what is the amount over there. So what happened, many people stopped after raising 1,000 rupees. The motive there is actually the certificate actually. On the other hand, if you look at my regular fundraising that I do with corporate volunteers, there the goal for them is 1,26,000 rupees, which is the cost of a student for the scholarship for 3 years. So what I tell them, right?
You give them targets from the beginning itself, right? That you have to raise this much amount.
Correct.
So we didn't do that. So
yeah, see, goal is now definitely required. If you look at compare this 2 type of fundraising we did in Intentional model, we told 10,000 minimum. I mean, 10,000 is your goal. 1,000 I will give a certificate. So many people stopped after 1,000. Probably even they had a potential, right? They would have stopped. On the other hand, 1,26,000 rupees model, people keep fundraising. Okay, and many people will be scared by the moment they saw, oh, 1,26,000, my first time fundraising is huge money, I cannot do it. But as a non-profit, I know they have a capacity because of my numbers, that's what they suggest, but convincing them becomes hard. So still, I'm yet to take a decision. What if I tell them, okay, you raise only 40,000, 50,000 rupees. Now the guy who has a potential of rising 1.26 is rising only 40,000, then we end up as a loser, because our model is not huge number of fundraising rising small amount of money. Our model is small amount of fundraisers rising huge number of money, so that we are not straining our non-profit with more admin cost and more managing the people. So that's why you need to choose which works best for you. So the biggest mistake we did is we took the adult model, directly copy pasted it for the college people, expected something. It didn't work out. So we have not yet cracked it. I don't have answers today how to fundraise from school or college students. I don't know, like Habitat or Smile. I can never do that model. That's not our core strength again. So you need to figure it out. That's what I'm telling you. So probably 2 years down the line, if IW2 organizes a meeting like that, I can come back and tell how I succeeded or how I failed again. That's the only thing.
So what I have, what
she can share.
Yeah. So maybe I think MAD, I don't know, maybe MAD, if they have a fundraise from college students and corporate people, you need to figure out a model how it works for a majority. But that the model that I told about didn't work with college students. And again, right, see, especially, I don't know, when you go to international schools, who will study in international school? Basically, it's rich students. Their network is very rich, so they can easily rise. But here are guys, you know, like when you take from a very poor background, moderate background, already there is fear. My network is small. I ask my friend, he donates 10 rupees to me. So, or they make me fun of it. So you need to overcome so many things to actually raise funds. So with the audience, I think we need to follow a very different strategy altogether. I mean, we need to still get deeper and understand what motivates them.
Sure. Thank you very much. Very, very useful. Thank you.
Superb. If there are any more questions left in the chat, please either repost them or feel free to unmute and ask.
I had one quick question. I wanted to understand in context of COVID, what and how did things change? Perhaps I put it on chat, but I'm repeating it again. That did it change for good, or that you saw fundamental changes, how volunteers approached fundraising, or the targets went down or up? Because I heard 1 or 2 of you saying that it went up, which was very interesting. So what are your quick observations for us to take note of?
So Anupama, Jagdish here. For us, yes, COVID was an unfortunate event, and if you I started my presentation by saying that when COVID began, we all thought, what we are going to do, and the peer-to-peer crowdfunding, especially with the IB schools, really happened for us. So from that perspective, yes, it was good. Unfortunate, so many people lost lives, but from a fundraising perspective, I think it was the best year for us, both in terms of individual fundraising and corporate fundraising. For us, the average went well because people wanted to contribute. In fact, right now, post-COVID situation, when we do normal crowdfunding, that has come down drastically. So if that answers your question, possibly.
Sure. Thanks, Jagdish.
So in our case, I would say something fundamentally, our average went up. Maybe my hypothesis to that would be many people are not traveling anymore. So they're sitting in the home. So, so more online time is available. So they started spending those time for fundraising. So I would say it contributed in a way from the fundraising perspective, because the amount of efforts or time that they are putting actually tremendously went up.
Right. Thanks.
So from Smile's perspective, it literally skyrocketed when it came to the corporate and the individuals. But because our school model was more physical and it was more in the, like I mentioned, the B schools at that point of time, so that took a back foot. But what happened with us was that the IB schools started connecting. So yes, it impacted our fundraising for some time. But now that we are approaching with a different strategy altogether, we had to re-strategize, regroup, and it's now picked up. But that's just from the school perspective. I'm not talking about the other fundraising.
Sure. Sure. Thanks, Monica.
Just one question to everyone over here, and some people who are staying back. Do you also have a global outreach or a global volunteer base? If any one of you does have that, then that's an excellent way to do it, because those are the people, and that's one insight, it just came to me right now. That is something which can happen, because people globally, when they give, they really give big sum. So in India, if the average donation is 2,500 to 3,000, globally it's about $100. So if you have some, global people who are there and they love to volunteer, because crowdfunding and volunteering is definitely very well established in mature markets like US and UK. So that's one more insight.
Yeah, I totally agree with what Jagdish is saying. Yes, see, typically if you apply behavioral science psychology here, round numbers in India is 500 rupees, 1,000 rupees, right? Or 5,000, 10,000. In same in US would be like $25, $50, $100. Now $100 is 7,000 rupees over there. So much higher than what people contribute here. So yes, global population, I think much useful crowd actually.
That's why Give India did really well.
Yeah, true.
Awesome. If we have any more questions, then we'll wait. Otherwise, we are good to wrap up. Super.
Great. I hope to get donation links from all of you, so that all of you can start tomorrow, start doing the crowd fundraising.
Yeah. Super. Thanks so much. Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining and for staying back also. I know it's been a relatively long one, but I hope the session was helpful. I think the speakers put a lot of time and effort in putting this together, and also share all their insights and respond to your questions as well. Megha, my colleague, I think had already shared their LinkedIn profiles in case you want to get in touch with them. And I think Jagdish has also shared his contact number. Super. So we'll keep in touch. We'll be sharing the session recording with all so that you can, we restricted it to one person per organization. So in case there are any colleagues of yours who would like to listen to it to see if there's anything you'd like to implement, do share it with them and other people that in the ecosystem as well. And we'll keep in touch. Super. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a
Thank
lot.
you everyone for giving the opportunity.